told me to wait till the next day. Conditions were really bad in the segregation unit at Walla Walla, Big Red they called it. And over time, we were able to communicate between tiers. I would publish a little newsletter and circulate it among the tiers about conditions and what needed to be done. And in our cells, we had, and we also wrote articles too. We called ourselves the Walla Walla Brothers. We wrote articles to outside publications such as the Northwest Patsy, which we called a progressive publication at the time. In our cells, we had a metal table that was welded to the metal wall, the steel wall that separated cells. And we found that if we banged on the table, that wall, it caused a very loud reverberation sound. And there are 24 tiers, 24 cells on a tier, and there's 4 tiers, almost 100 men. And all of us, we knew when the mainline population would go to chow. And every time the mainline population would go to chow, we would bang on our tables. Boom, 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 boom. Someone said they could hear that sound all the way downtown Walla Walla. I don't believe that, but it was loud. After 3 days of this, the general population went down on strike. They had a list of 14 demands. The number 1 demand was to rectify conditions in the segregation unit. This was a 47-day strike, the longest prison strike, work strike in state history. And it was a big story in the newspapers. In the newspapers, on the television, radio stations, everybody was, and correctional officials were interviewed, guards were interviewed, and all kinds of officials were interviewed. On about day 44 of this 47-day strike, the George Jackson Brigade bombed 2 Rainier banks, issued a communique pointing out the interlocking directorship between the Seattle Times and the Rainier banks, and noted that during the entire time that this strike was going on, not one single prisoner had ever been interviewed, nor was it ever hinted that the prisoners might have some legitimate beef. Well, of course, the reporters don't like to think of themselves as being the one-sided lackeys that they are, and so some prisoners were interviewed. The change of consciousness that took place in the state of Washington over the next couple of days, I've never witnessed before. It was just a complete 180-degree turnaround. Harold Bradley, the director of corrections, was fired. B.J. Ray, the warden of Walla Walla, was removed. The associate warden was sent to a kids' joint at Sheldon. And we, who called ourselves the Walla Walla Brothers, were released to the general population, where we went on to organize Men Against Sexism and to stop the buying and selling of prisoners by other prisoners and prisoner-on-prisoner rape. Now, this is a second example of how armed force was used to complement a mass struggle. Were we armed liberals? That's up to you to decide. Mark?
Okay, some things overlooked the makeup of the brigade and of the Panthers. 2/3 of the Panthers were women, and the Panthers were not all black. My closest comrade to this day is Mike Nagawa. He was the drill master of the Seattle chapter of the Black Panther Party. He's Japanese. Okay, in the brigade, there's three main women in there: Bo Brown, Therese Coupé, and Janine Bertram. These were women who acknowledged being part of the brigade. They're the ones who kept it going when Ed and I got locked up. Ed and Sherman were locked up. They took over. When I broke Sherman out, they took him underground. So this machoism, however you put it, the men run things, it's really much bullshit. They're not going to run without everybody working together. And we were fortunate enough in the Panthers and in the brigade to have these women working with us and working for us. Just wanted to make that clear.
And we were both communists, Marxists and anarchists gay and straight, you know, a good mix of people given the times.
Okay, the people I named are the ones who fell, who ended up in prison. But there were others who helped us, who were not actual members of the brigade, but they knew who we were, and when we were doing actions, they knew what we needed. When we needed a car, they'd go out and get us a car, you know. If we needed a safe house, they would find a safe house for us. When I was short on people to help with the escape, John Sherman, I went out and found them in the community. They came in and helped. They've never been named, but their numbers are larger than the people who are actually named in brigade.
When we first started talking about forming the brigade, it came out of a study group of a Weather Underground book called Prairie Fire. And when we talked, and that book advocated armed struggle here behind enemy lines. That we fight the enemy no matter where, you know, wherever we find ourselves on its soil. And so a third of the people said, oh, that's what, you know, let's do it. A third could care less, and a third said, oh no, we're infiltrated by the FBI, we're infiltrated, you know, they'll know. This 1/3 rule is pretty. A third of the people during the first American Revolution were for the crown. A third didn't care one way or another, and a third were what we would call today patriots. And I've seen this happen over and over again in my experiences. And I was going somewhere with that, but I'm happy to see it, so hopefully.
Like I say, I mentioned this kind of a high risk and what's necessary to make a movement work. We were young then, lots younger than we are right now, about 30, 40 years to get there. In the Panthers, we had teenagers who were Panthers. Little Bobby Hutton was an officer in the administration of the Panthers. He was a teenager. And the work they did work in school. They did work with the freedom schools, which are, like I said, it's kind of like the Head Start program for blacks back in those days. In fact, we're the ones that encouraged the government to start that Head Start program. They just followed the path that we led for them. Same way with the food stamps. We fed people in the communities all, and in a sense blackmailed some of the owners of the businesses to give us food to feed those people in the community. And that was the beginning of the food stamps. The food stamps were made to undermine work that the Panthers were doing. They had more, the government has more money, of course it's your money, than we could, you know, get out other people, big enough for other people. So they had a better program, which is cool with us. It was supposed to go on forever, but as you see, it's slowly going away. They're putting conditions, huge conditions on people who can get food stamps, who need food, so to speak. And of course, when I went into retirement, I didn't have anything to, money coming in, so I was on food stamps for a while. Started off at $200, down to $15 right now, so fuck it, you know, I'd rather starve to death. We're going to leave this open to questions in a minute, but go ahead, yeah.
I remember where I was going with this. The 1/3 that thought we were infiltrated. Right? You can't know what a peach tastes like unless you bite into it. We can't know whether we're infiltrated until we just go ahead and do whatever it is we're going to do. And if that is in fact the case, then we go down and those who come behind us pick up that crimson banner and carry it forward. The FBI had no idea who the brigade was until we were busted. And they probably wouldn't have known even then had we not said so. as a result of one of our comrades being killed by police. We felt it was important that his passing not be a criminal act, but rather it be a political act. And I mention this because of the anarchists in the environmental movement and the animal protection movement, who will take steps in these directions of illegality, but do so without understanding that revolution is against the law. It's the act by which one class forcibly overthrows another. That imprisonment is a very real possibility, and so when you step in that direction, when you start moving in that direction, you have to be willing to accept the consequences that come with it, and not fall back into bourgeois modes of thinking, which are look out for number one, and to hell with my friends. I'm going to get down first. You just you took the step. You did the crime. You did the time. And when you go to prison, that's just another front in the ongoing struggle. So.
Yeah, again, I'll repeat what he said, but you have to break the law to be a revolutionary. It's not going to happen any other way. And everybody just broke the law. Everybody did is sped on the freeway. Everybody did is jaywalk and didn't really stop at that stop sign. And you tore the tag off the mattress. We all have it in us to be revolutionaries. There's just, you have to take a step a little bit further. There's more than just that little short step. You got to step a little bit further to be a revolutionary. And you have to really analyze what's going on around you. It's easy to read a book or read what happened in the Russian Revolution or the Spanish Revolution. There's a lot of books written about revolutions all over the country, in the Latin Americas, in Asian revolutions. A lot of books are written, but you have to analyze yourself. Is this going to work? We were given, in the past, we were given a book called The Little Red Book by Mao. I don't know if anybody's read it. Okay, these are almost philosophical sayings of Mao. But it's hard to read. As a lieutenant of information, I didn't really try to teach the whole thing to the Panthers I was working with. I picked and chose the parts I was teaching them because it's not an easy book to read. It's almost like reading the original version of the Bible. And he was a great leader. He had great ideas. He had people to work with him, a small group of people to work with him that knew how to analyze the people and figure out how to get them involved. Our communiques that we put out were to explain the actions that the George Jacks Brigade took. Every action we took, we put out a communique explaining exactly why it was done. And that's what, in a sense, what upset the government most of all. It came to a point where they started telling radio stations and TV stations not to read those communiques when they got them, and they don't do it anymore. They turn them over to the government immediately. There's some weird law, and the laws are getting tighter now where they have to do. They have to do it now. Back then, they just decided to do it, because they wanted to stay friends with the cops, so to speak. The revolution for me didn't end when I got locked up. I knew there were other groups out there who were still active. I met political prisoners when I came into prison, and while I was there, other political prisoners came in after me. Very few of us got out. There's a lot of them still locked up. The men and women are still locked up. Some of them are in exile in different countries, in Africa, in Cuba, in South America, exile in the U.S. Every once in a while, one will turn themselves in, I don't mean to knock the white bread, but when whites turn themselves in, they don't get too much time. If blacks turn themselves in, we're going to do a lot of time. I think of Leonard Peltier. He belonged to AIM, and they formed AIM after the 10-point program of the Black Panther Party. That was their the rule of thumb, how things were going to work. Leonard is still locked up with a lot of the old Panthers. And whether he did, I don't think he killed that police officer, that FBI man. But whether he did or not is immaterial. We do not lock Native Americans up for life. It's just, that's our responsibility. We should always stand up for them. I'd rather have them stand up for him than stand up for me or stand up for Ed or anybody else who is down. Because what we've done to them, to take this land and supposedly made it to a democratic paradise, is bullshit. And they tried to stop us from trying it, and he's one of the last revolutionaries, Native American revolutionary, as far as I'm concerned, and he does not deserve to be locked up. I know nobody came here to hear that, but I just had to slip it in anyway.
There are about 150 political prisoners in the United States. Then it behooves you, if anybody might be thinking of breaking some kind of law, that you come to know a little bit about these people and do what you can. I don't suppose any of you know about the Palmer raids of 1919 when revolutionaries were just going about their daily business, and all of a sudden Attorney General Palmer starts sweeping them up by the thousands. Emma Goldman and hundreds of others exiled, exported, whatever they call it when they kick you out of the country. That could happen again. You just never know. Randy is a terrorist.
We're going to leave it open right now for questions, and now we'll let it babble on more. Yeah.
Mr. Cook, I heard a radio interview by you, and I believe in the interview one of the comments you made is the host was asking you questions was about you being a member of the George Jackson Brigade, and in that interview you said you were really just a peripheral member, that they credited you with being a member of the George Jackson Brigade, but that you were certainly willing to accept the credit, but that you weren't a central member to it. So that is the preface. What I want to ask is about two things. One, you mentioned one of your comrades or members was killed, and if my understanding is correct, that was during a bank robbery, correct? Okay, and I believe, Mr. Cook, according to the FBI files that I read, you were driving the getaway car, and is that incorrect?
No, that's what they said. I never.
Okay,
I mean, it's overdone. I've done the time maxed out on that.
Okay, and the FBI papers allege that you fired a shot at one of the police during this bank robbery. It missed and it hit one of the members in the jaw. And following that, when he was being transported to a hospital, you shot at, and I don't remember whether the guard was killed or just he was grievously injured. Okay, and the guy was being transported, temporarily escaped.
That I did do.
They recaptured you later. Okay, what came of that? I mean, were you charged with that? What was the sentence for shooting a police officer? And do you believe that this was a revolutionary act? Or, my question is, what is the government supposed to do when buildings are being bombed and banks are being robbed and police officers are being shot?
When we talk about freeing political prisoners, you guys can do it any way you want. I did it my way.
Okay. So what came of that? What were you sentenced for?
I was sentenced to a life sentence. Sentenced to double life for having a shootout with the police at the banks. I got convicted of that, and for shooting Virgil Johnson. That was a police deputy. And I got 10 years for aiding the escape. That was just by the fifth alone. No, that was by the Down by the state, double life and 10 by the state, and I got 30 years plus 5 years for the bank robbery by theft. And they were all running consecutively. I should never be out because but they decided
it's a miracle that you're
it
here.
did.
Yeah.
The feds would not give me any parole. I just had to do my time for like all the good time I could get. Then I kind of came out. They sent me to the state. And the state looked at it and saw, well, heads out. And we're not going to be racist. We got to let this guy out too. So that's pretty much what happened, yeah. With a little help from them on the outside.
Thank you.
In terms of, you know, what are the police supposed to do?
Mhm.
Or what is the state supposed to do?
Mhm.
First of all, we need to, I gave a little bit of the, in terms of the context that existed at the time. Revolutions taking place all over the country. There's China helping Vietnam, the Soviet Union. There, you know, like the forces of progress were on the march on a global scale. And that's how we saw things. We were wrong. Ronald Reagan was about to become president of the United States, and the rollback of all the progressive movements around the country was taking place, including his arming the Contras with, you know, and so we were out of touch with political realities that existed at the time. But that's a way. Had those political realities been what we thought they should be, or what we thought that they were, then when the police have an option, that they can, you know, they can become part of the progressive movement. They don't have to be the henchmen of the state. They don't have to be part of the apparatus of repression. They can be something else. But
yeah, in the Panthers, you know, like I say, little Bobby Hunt was killed in a police shootout. John Huggins and Bunchy Carter were killed by a conspiracy set up by the FBI. There were a lot of Panthers that were killed back in those days.
for them,
Yeah, and we, you know, it was,
killed in his sleep.
yeah.
Can we get questions from other people too?
Yeah, okay.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, but anyway, like I say, it was a war that was going on. It wasn't not a civil. We didn't try and play it off as just demonstrations or peaceful. We knew we were at war with those people at that time.
George Jackson said it best. If there's going to be funerals, there should be funerals on both sides.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering, you know, you brought up surveillance and how a lot of things are worse now in a lot of ways, and people are more complacent and atomized. And I was just, you know, I'm thinking about like just all the, you know, things that didn't exist. Like the context is really different in a lot of ways than, you know, when you guys were doing what you were doing. And you know, there's surveillance cameras. There's like, you know, social media sites that are, you know, mapping out social networks, and people are carrying cell phones that, you know, are recording people's conversations. And it's like, it's, you know, back, y'all had these relationships based on trust and solidarity, and if people kept their mouths shut, as long as people kept their mouths shut, and you knew you could trust people, then they couldn't be gathering information on your private conversations. Now it's like if somebody forgot to turn off their cell phone, you know, there's a microphone in the room, and it's like it's so much harder. Like, how do you see like revolutionary organizing taking place in that this new context?
You're right. It's back in our day, it was easy for us to make false identifications, good driver's license, and such like that. Before I left San Francisco, there was a story in the Chronicle about some high school kids in a neighboring suburb who had made false California driver's licenses with the what do you call it, 3D logo, and you know, the whole works. And they were selling these to the other high school students so that they could buy liquor. And somebody got caught with one of them, and of course they ratted out where they got it. And the kids that were making the ID kept a list of everybody they sold it to for some reason. And so they got everybody. My point is that it is, I mean, if these 16-year-old high school students can do it, probably some, dedicated people could also do it. But I think probably in this day and age, if I was going to do something like that again, which I'm definitely not, I would get off the grid. I would leave my cell phone, I would leave my Facebook page. With the cell phone, they know who you call and they know where you go. With your Facebook, they know where you might go if you ever get on the run. And maybe you don't want the state to know all of that kind of information. And so many people are just, the police go to Facebook right off the bat when they're looking for something. And, it doesn't, anybody who thinks they might someday be a revolutionary should live their life accordingly.
Some of the best work I ever done as a revolutionary has never been recorded, but Daniel Britton Rose did a good objective, analysis of the Panther, not Panther, the Jack Brigade. There were 2 books, A Teeth with the Movement and Guerrilla USA. Guerrilla USA?
Building a team with movement.
Yeah.
Building a movement.
Yeah, but anyways, it talks about the actions we took and the communiques we wrote, and they're all in there. Even a little bit of poetry that some of the people stuck in. If I had the chance to do it again at a younger age, I'd step in and I'd do it again, because I've seen what's goes on inside of prisons, for one thing, and I see what goes on in neighborhoods that are not really represented by the government. The police can do a lot of things in ghettos and barrios that they can't get away with behind those, gated communities. In my heart, I'm a revolutionary, and I don't break the law just to be breaking the law. I did a little speed coming down here, but I was missing stuff. There's laws that are made that don't need to be made, like the laws against same-sex marriage or marijuana, or you don't make a crime out of a health problem. And anybody who overuses drugs, that's a health problem, stone health problem. If you're selling drugs in order to support that problem, that's still a health problem. But they're giving people life sentences for doing things like that. I don't believe in a sentence over 25 years. That's what the Russians did to start off with. They changed it later on. Yeah, you got it.
Yeah. Can you talk more about the Men Against Sexism and what that actually looked like organizing inside, and maybe some like the difficulties or things you have?
Okay. Can everybody hear me all right? Okay. Well, I